3 years ago, when the war in Ukraine started, it paralyzed me. I live in Europe, and the idea of war happening in Europe again was like a reality check. Yes, nuclear war is still an actual possibility, and it can happen in your lifetime. And this uncertainty towards the future made me feel like, why bother do anything? Why try to do anything useful or meaningful with my life if I might suddenly die? If all the effort and struggle you put in might amount to nothing? Just the raw, brutal existential truth of this made me cower in fear. And this line of thinking was more than just nihilism. It was the direct confrontation of the undeniable truth and the terror of being alive. And this existential fear made me want to disassociate. It reminded me of a deep dislike that I have for reality. And I think many can relate with this feeling because nobody has decided to be born and we are just suddenly stuck here and have to live this life with all of our pains and struggles. I wanted to work on myself and create a better future, but all this uncertainty made me again feel this doomer mindset. And I started to express that in self-destructive behaviors, a lot of bad habits, a lot of smoking, and drugs overall. There was an underlying fear that I suddenly might wake up one day in a nightmare again. And the reason I say again is because I had a psychedelic trip, like a bad trip, that traumatized me. And it took me 2 years to get over that. And for this duration and a little bit afterwards too, there was this feeling that suddenly I might wake up again in just some brutal, terrible state of, a lot of discomfort and suffering. By the way, if you haven't noticed, this is going to be a dark video, but it will get better towards the end, I promise. It will all be worth it. Like, it's worth to acknowledge the truth. So, the idea that World War III could happen just seemed likely to me because of like these traumatic experience or like this traumatic experience that I had. It made me understand that reality really doesn't care about you. Things happen and then you just have to go through with them. And I think everybody who has had some traumatic stuff happen knows this feeling. This feeling that it is more likely that more bad things happen to you, despite how delusional that kind of is. So we create this feeling of fear that wants to protect us. And by doing so, it causes us more self-harm and destruction and complacency. We express this through all our bad habits. We express this by grabbing the phone, procrastinating, and not working out in ourselves. We might also feel numb and just disconnected from life. So this pull against fear and this confusing feeling of why is all of this even possible, and how you can overcome that, and how I overcame that to be more connected with life. All of this is what we will talk about. So this fear of annihilation is deep rooted, and it really starts with our birth, right? With our birth, we come into this world crying. It is not comfortable to be. There's something inherently kind of tense about being a limited form in like a limited space. And in this limited form, we kind of have to deal with the fact that we haven't chosen to be here. Nobody has chosen any of this. And it's this underlying tension with having to appreciate and accept it that causes all of this dysfunction. This feeling that kind of nothing really matters and that it's all chaos. And deep down, what it comes down to is that we don't really want to accept that death is real. The destruction and entropy that we are all inhabiting in. It's like really the most natural thing to die, actually. And destruction and entropy is the most natural thing for the universe. But for us, since it destroys our boundaries and our sense of self, it feeds evil. But it's not just that, it's also the sheer suffering that you're confronted with when you go through life. You simply exist and you have to carry the burden of that and manage a body where you will function in that, and preferably in a positive and happy way. And all of these tensions and struggles point to some very deep spiritual truth that, if you don't acknowledge them, confuse you for your entire life. And they will cause, very miserable life if not confronted. Because it's also not like humans have chosen for nuclear weapons to be a possibility. We kind of stumbled upon it by our never-ending desire for knowledge and power. Albert Einstein and Oppenheimer were so dead afraid when they stumbled upon nuclear weapons, and they surely thought this might be the end of the world. And I find it fascinating to put myself in their shoes, like just imagining discovering such huge raw power. It must have been so crazy to have such a love for science and reality and the world and physics, to then just by this pure curiosity maybe unfolding or revealing the end of the planet. Both of them had a lot of regrets in their involvement with nuclear weapons. But this curiosity has defined everything we humans have done. And more than just human curiosity, there's something deep about the concept of curiosity itself. Because looking at what reality is like objectively, reality is curious. It is explorative. It's exploring infinite potential through everything that exists in all its different forms and shapes. And we don't need to make this about God or a deity or some sort of belief system now where, we put religion in this place. Like, it's just a matter of fact that if you simply look at what's happening with life, there's something incredible going on. And it seems that the amount of possibilities are infinite. And it's not a matter now about belief systems or ideologies. It's just simply what you can see right in front of you. There are infinite forms, infinite spaces, seeming infinite possibilities. From a human perspective, you might feel quite limited. But if you ignore your own limitations and look at everything that really is, well, then it doesn't really seem like that there are that many limitations. Reality seems generally creative, intelligent, and capable to create so much different stuff that you couldn't come up with in your wildest dreams. From planets to ants to computer chips, nuclear bombs, and bread. It just really, the list is infinite of concepts reality has created. And of course, there's like some human filtering happening here, and we humans kind of make it real by our own perception of what the usefulness of a thing is. But the matter of fact is that reality is quite incredible. And I think you are dismissing its nature if you don't look at it, if you look at it as anything but curiosity and intelligence. And through all these laws that the universe explores, it's finding its infinite nature. And if you feel your own sense of discomfort and fear and dislike for reality, I think you are touching in direct contact with something very, very profound here. And when you connect with this feeling of childlike curiosity for life and this primal fear of death, I think you are reaching towards something transcendental, something that goes beyond your tiny human self. Because let's be real here, nuclear weapons shouldn't exist. How the hell did we evolve to the point where we learned how to make our entire planet explode and decay at just the push of a button? Rockets flying through continents It is really insane how far we've come. It's like almost funny. Really envision how the first human discovered fire in a pit to this. Like it would be, like it is quite incredible if it wasn't clearly what is happening. Can you see how much power we hold? When you're afraid of this annihilation and destruction, you are afraid of your own power. Religion spoke in ancient texts about places like heaven or hell. Nuclear weapons prove that hell is real, and it's a place on Earth. But I really don't want you to be paralyzed by this fear and by all of this possibility. I have no idea how long this human experiment is going to last. I have zero control over what the world chooses to become. But there is a transcendent feeling of meaning and purpose, despite all of this chaos. It's like this is what reality or God, whatever you want to call it, has chosen to be. And you probably think, like the rationalist within you will probably think, yeah, chosen, but if it's not a God, then it isn't really a choice. But there's a weird dilemma here happening. In the fear that you don't accept that something could choose for something so horrible for nuclear war to happen, like this cannot possibly be a choice from some reasonable actor, you are dismissing something crucial. This fear points to something that you need to accept to come to terms with your own nature. The truth is that nuclear war is not just a possibility. The fact that reality allows for such levels of destruction shows that it's kind of inevitable. Deep suffering is part of this infinite curiosity. There's sadly no way around that. And the more you deny it, the more fear will paralyze you. Because you're just denying yourself. When war happens on other parts of this planet, it is easy to create a mental separation from it. Like you are one of the lucky ones it isn't happening to. And if it isn't happening to you personally, well, it's almost like as if it is not happening at all. Like it's not real. So, of course, the idea that something could choose for it to be real, like as if reality accepts itself in this way, is very scary. But it's a fact that our entire history is filled with war and destruction. We have just been born in very lucky times where we are pretty much isolated from this constant threat of death. And when you let go of your limited human identity and see reality as a whole, this pain of the world becomes not just about your limited human self. It becomes an existential question. That's why a lot of spiritual seekers and just spiritually inclined people carry often the pain of the entire world on their shoulders. Because we empathize with a lot of stuff other people just dismiss. And if you are this type of person, it is likely that you either suppress this, get paralyzed by it, or, in the best case scenario, it fuels your sense of responsibility. Because when you realize that there's not really a difference between another being suffering and you yourself suffering, this desire to improve and help the world becomes a natural impulse. And I understand you might rebel against what I say. It's like, what do you mean there's no difference? Of course there's a difference. If I'm in pain or if somebody else is in pain, I clearly know and feel the difference. And on one side, well, yes, of course. This is what it feels like to be a distinct self with an ego, a sense of identity. But the truth you fear when you think about the global catastrophe that a nuclear war would be, it's not just about yourself, is it? It's way deeper than that. And I think there you are connecting with something important. Because your capacities are infinite, both for good and for bad. And what this truly means is that you find yourself in everything that is happening. When you wonder what is reality like, well, it is everything that is happening. It is not just you. Because if reality truly is exploring its infinite potential, how could it know what it's like to be it without becoming it? It needs to be a cat to know what it's like to be a cat. So it needs to know all aspects of itself. Like infinity needs to see what it is capable of to be infinite. And it cannot have any bias. This is what makes it so powerful, and also what makes it so beautiful. If reality were to make distinctions, this is good, but this isn't, this I can allow, but this I can't, well, then it wouldn't be infinite, would it? And this hits very deep, because the way it explores this infinite expansion and possibility is by creating limitations, by creating different forms and beings. And what awakening is to realize that you are just one of them. You are one of these limitations. But your true nature goes beyond your single life. All that what we call evil is everything that goes against our limitation, against our egos. And you can see that, like really everything that we think is evil is simply because it goes against our preferences. So in this sense, ego is really the creator of good and evil. And this is also what you see, right? The moment we think about sins, we think about greed, and we think about, just putting yourself over others. It's always that which destroys you or destroys what you want that is evil. But from the perspective of the tsunami or the giant explosion, it's just another movement in the universe happening that needs to know itself. The fact that anything exists at all makes it so that reality can't be limited by anything. Limitations themselves are simply another aspect of the whole of existence. It's another sum of its parts. And this means that in the ultimate sense, and yeah, it's pretty trippy, but in the ultimate sense, you can't die. Because existence is a totality that permeates through everything. It's not bound by you as a person. Or, in other words, you have died infinite times already, in infinite ways. We have died infinite times already. That's how we constructed this entire society. The question is just how are you identified with it? You can think about our entire human history and feel like you just spawned here out of nowhere and it's like, oh, how does all of this happen? We came from fire to this. Or you can recognize that that's all been you, man. A product of infinite generations of beings creating and destroying, inventing and discovering, simply to see what's possible. Like, what is life? Why does life exist? What is this movement? What is this movement towards growth and expansion? It's about knowledge, curiosity. The fact that nuclear war is possible means that it likely somewhere, somewhere, somehow in the universe has happened. Multiverses, if you want. But it's by seeing this fear in the possibility of it happening where you see your own nature. Because it's possible. This means it's real. This means it's a part of you. Of course, this doesn't mean that it has to happen to you in this limited form or on this planet or to me in this limited form. I got hope not. Sounds very awful. But what I'm trying to say is that consciousness knows what it's like to destroy and create in all its different forms. Because this is what we really are. This never-ending cycle of construction and creation, order and chaos. And you don't need to believe me like some sort of ideology or as if I'm some sort of preacher telling you the truths of the universe. I want you to simply look at what's happening right in front of you. I'm not making this up. If you let go of your delusions and let go of your ego and your sensation of distinct self, it becomes very obvious that this is what's happening. The potential for destruction is simply a contrast to the potential of creation. The universe moves towards entropy and chaos, and in between, living organisms create order and beauty. But it's not just living organisms that create that, right? Like when we see, for example, a piece of snow falling, the incredible, like almost architectural beauty of it, or like in a water droplet, we can see this beauty in creation everywhere. And we like to simplify stuff or just kind of dismiss it. Like when you are on top of the mountain and look at the beautiful landscape, there's just something awe-inspiring that happening. It's like, whoa, this is beautiful. Well, what is this, right? What is this nature of beauty? So yeah, creation and destruction is what reality is doing. It's this beauty that it's wanting to create. And from the highest perspective, it is all beautiful. There's no reason to choose one thing over another. But of course, as a limited self, this doesn't work. Because if we were doing this, well, then the beauty of a lion would cause in your death. So yeah, that's what it's doing, and you are part of it. When you see this fully and embrace it, you lose your fear. Because there's really nothing to fear. Reality has no bias. Limited organisms have biases. The ultimate doesn't care one way or the other what happens. It simply needs to know all aspects of itself. But there's a more beautiful side to it. Something that you feel also drawn to when you want to improve yourself or see the beauty in the landscape. Because this mindset, or like this truth, is like a huge aspect of reality that needs to be recognized. But then often people start to feel trapped in their lives or reality, as if this is like a prison planet and they need to escape or whatever. But if you really understand what you are seeing here, then what this means is that you are truly, absolutely free. The universe has chosen absolute freedom, unconditional love for whatever it wants to become. This is why all this evil and destruction is even possible. Because it doesn't differentiate. It wants to be everything. Because the ultimate does not put any limitation on its power. Hence, here you are. And again, I can hear the rationalists in you say, or the rationalist in you say, but the universe didn't really choose it, right? Like it's not a human type of choice. It's not a singular being with a choice. But think about it this way. If the universe had a choice, what would freedom really look like? Humans' idea of freedom is to simply preserve themselves, right? But humans are not free to do what goes against their own interest. Because of the nature of our limited self, we are not free to like something that we don't like. We're not free to do something we don't want to do. So we are, by this nature, not ultimately free. We are also not free as a human to be a cat, because, we're limited as a human. So the nature of true freedom has to be that it has no sense of self. True freedom has no biases. Ultimate freedom has no preferences, except to be what it is. Hence, this is what you see. The question of choice only makes sense if you think that there's someone there that could choose. But if the universe is just this infinity, then there's nothing that can control it or have power over it, because it has ultimate power over itself. So the consequence of that is that whatever it chooses to do is what you see is happening. And therefore, reality does exactly what it wants to do. Freedom has to look like determinism. Freedom has to look like cause and effect. Because whatever it chooses is what it simply is. There's no other way. But when I say this, the infinite, the universe, God, I'm creating like a separation, right? I'm telling you there's like the universe or the infinite, and then there's you. What I'm talking about, you. The separation isn't real. You are embodying what I'm saying. I'm embodying what I'm saying. And my cute little cat laying on my bed right now embodies what I'm saying. Everything that is possible will happen. That's just the nature of infinity. And this existential terror is what we as humans have to grapple with. This, possibility that contains all truths. Existence is that powerful. You are that powerful. You are the species who built all of this. Even though I abstract it, like the energy, all this power is running through you right now. And you can see that because we have, like, our species is the species who has tamed fire and split the atom. So you can either cower in fear by seeing your true nature, reject your power, or you can accept what you can clearly see. When you clearly see what is possible and don't try to deny it or reject it, then reality will change in the way that you want to. Because it's all starts with you. And when you feel unsatisfied with how you are living your life, tired of your addictions, tired of your bad habits, tired of just your failure, you're actually showing another deep aspect of existence. And that's where all of the beauty comes in. You're showing real compassion. Not as simply a human feeling for other living beings, but as like compassion as another crucial aspect of this nature. Because despite having no self, whatever you are still fears for its own potential destruction. And you still empathize and feel for other beings' destruction, wishing for your life to be better and for the world to be better. You can see that there's this feeling of compassion and connection that permeates through everything. On one hand, everything is how it is and it cannot be otherwise. But also, all your choices and all your actions have consequences. And you can envision a better world and choose something better. Think about it. All the stuff here that we've talked about so far is quite real. And you can talk about it from a human lens, you can talk about some like weird godly enlightened lens, you can craft belief systems around it and ideologies around it. But none of it changes what we both can clearly see happens. Reality is real and we are it. And this all-powerful intelligence wants through us. And it is telling us, I don't want to destroy things. I don't want to cause more pain. There's so much potential for beauty and love. We want to grow and prosper because this is our nature. It is creation. And this fear that we sense in all of this possibility space, it is compassion. Compassion that is pointing to all what we talked about, guiding us to the truth that we are all literally connected, that we are all one. And we don't want to hurt ourselves. This desire to hurt another only comes from this idea of being separate. But when we see clearly, war becomes the most stupid thing we can do. Because why would you hurt yourself? It doesn't make any sense. And what an intricate setup this is for nature to explore its own reality, or for reality to explore its own nature. If everybody would live according to these deep recognitions, a nuclear war won't happen. Because why wouldn't we be kind to each other when we know that we are everybody? Therefore, this existential fear for annihilation, what actually is hiding, is our awakening. It's the realization how we are far more than just one person, and far more than just personhood altogether. And you can also see how in the nature of pleasure and pain, harmony and dissonance, there's meaning in the universe, like embedded. Everything wants to go away from suffering and move towards love and bliss, beauty. And that's not a human thing. It's what everything is doing. Why stars collide and black holes form. Why there's so much beauty in just a single snow droplet. Always trying to find new ways to express its own potential and connectivity. And if you flip the idea that infinity makes everything possible, therefore somewhere some war is always inevitable, if you take this idea and flip it on its head, you can also see that an utopia is absolutely inevitable. Everything is driving towards a space of pure bliss and beauty. This is a natural drive. This well-being, the fact that we are living as entities who want to feel good, is a natural drive. Heaven exists, and it's a place on earth. It's only the ego who obstructs it. But you don't want to cower in fear. Courage and ambition are virtues because they connect us to the divine, the transcendent. The highest possible good is manifested when you stop with all of your addictive behaviors and self-destructive tendencies and you live with virtue in accordance to this deep desire for well-being. Because it's precisely this living within virtue that will save us from certain doom. And this happens at the level of the individual, people embodying virtues. Society is made out of individuals, peoples like you and me. It's not some abstract concept where everybody else is responsible and you aren't. It all ends up being about the individual, about you. To try to control things that other people are doing that cannot be controlled is what caused all of this mess. This is why Stoicism and this acceptance of all that can't be controlled is actually also the antidote towards suffering. Many don't notice this, but there's a very strong difference between suffering and physical pain. Because suffering is pain plus resistance. It's a psychological reaction from not accepting the natural flow of how things are or how things are manifesting. For example, when you go running and your lungs burn, it's not a pleasant sensation at all, but it's also an energizing sensation, right? Like there's this recognition that it comes from a healthy place. But if you felt the same sense of burning in your lungs randomly after you are waking up one morning, well, you would feel very different about the same sensation. So it's context dependent, but also how your mind understands where the sensation is coming from or why the sensation is happening in the first place. And if you start to understand that all discomfort that you experience in your life is literally a natural response of just the isness of the universe into you are it, then there's not this resistance anymore and you suffer a lot less to almost nothing. This is why you've probably seen this. Like there are Buddhists who have burned themselves alive in protest and they didn't even flinch. How is this possible? Well, it's possible because they recognize the truth and they have integrated this in their bodies. Like their nervous system has completely integrated the fact that they are not their bodies and they will move on after their bodies. And when they burn themselves, they don't resist the sensation and therefore are able to do such a thing. And this is why Stoicism as a philosophy has also survived for so long, because it's just the right way to live, the most pleasant way to live. And Stoicism doesn't mean to be cold and not acknowledge your emotions or to never react naturally to how you're feeling. It means to cry when you are sad and to love when you're happy, to let everything flow how it must, how it naturally does. Not as if you don't experience anything. That would actually be another form of resistance and the entire opposite. Being courageous is not feeling fear. It's doing the right thing despite feeling fear. Because there can be no courage without fear. And it all follows logically into place, really. If reality is infinite potential, then it wants to explore itself without... If reality has infinite potential and it wants to explore itself without bias, then of course, how would it be able to know such things as courage without the possibility of fear or its opposites? So it's in these infinite creations of limitations and differences that make all of this possible. Like it becomes kind of obvious if you accept the proposition that such things like, for example, sensations of courage exist and can exist, right? You see like, oh, I can feel such a thing like courage. Then it becomes natural to ask, oh, okay, so if everything is possible, then a sensation like courage must be possible, and it can only be possible if all the evil things also are possible. So despite you not being able to know what the future can bring, like it's really impossible, betting on your own destruction is not a bet I would make. Sooner or later you will be right, but you'll miss decades of wonder and beauty. And even more than that, we might miss out on building the actual utopia that is in our reach. So if the possibility of nuclear war should teach you one thing, is that reality's capabilities of beauty and hate, destruction and creation have really no limits. And you are the thing that has the power to wield them both. And with great power comes great responsibility. At the end, we all are just really a small speck in the history of the cosmos. Like the dinosaurs got wiped out after millions of years by a meteor. Like, man, bad luck for them. So at the end, everything gets what it deserves. But I don't think that humanity deserves hell yet. I think we are better than that. And your drive towards something better shows it. So work on yourself and prove me right. For more guidance, check out my Discord community. And to find out who you are as a person more deeply, click on this video next.